Hello, I hope everyone's doing well. Today we're going to use another technique, and this technique, I start out with a card base that's already cut and scored. I'm using some very lightweight watercolor paper for this card, heavy enough to stand but light enough not to impact the design too much. But you can use any cardstock. I suggest white, ivory, or ivory for this technique. Also, what I'm using some masking papers. So this paper, I think it's by Clips. I'll try to put it in the description for you. Many of you probably already have it, but it's a sticky paper. You could use post-it notes if you didn't want to use the sticky paper, but I like it because it's wider and taller. And all I'm going to do is take a piece of it, and because it's so wide, in this case I'm going to cut it in half. And let me just show you what that looks like. So as you can tell, you can use them over and over again because I've already done this technique a few times, so the paper is stained. I've got the card base temporarily adhered to my grid paper. And now I'm going to use the grid paper lines to decide how much space there's going to be on each side. So I'm going to do 3 squares to the right of the score line. So you can tell the card is laid open flat, so the score line is right here, right? So I'm actually using my grid paper to count 3 squares over from the score line, and then I'm laying that masking paper down. It rolls after a while, so if it rolls on me, I'll actually take a piece of tape and just stick it at the top and the bottom, not anywhere on the card, of course, so that it doesn't roll up on this side. It won't roll up on this side, but just to prevent it from rolling up on the other side. Then I'm going to take my other side. So I had cut this tape in half, and then I took the 2 straight edges, and now I'm going to 5 squares. So, and how many squares you're going to do over, determine the thickness of the area not being masked. And I think that's too thin. But what you can do is take the stamp that you plan to use and put it on a Stampin' Majig plastic. Then you can see how wide it's going to be in relation to the stamp. And I just want my stamp to be a little bit wider. So that's actually good. I think I'm going to leave it. Well, I think I want one more. So I want one more over. So I'm just going to move it over one more. And when I say squares, I'm counting squares on my grid paper. This way I don't have to think about the math. That is, each square represents 1/8 of an inch, just for those of you that like the math. Alright, so now I have 6 squares of width, and the rest of my card is being masked off. Now, for this technique, I'm going to use distressed inks, but you could use whatever inks you like. I'm going to use distressed inks because I like the way they respond to shimmer paint and water, which I have mixed together here. Alright, so I'm going to start with my lightest colors, and I'm just going to take a tumbled glass. So my first color is tumbled glass. I'm going to put that on my ink applicator, and I'm going to start in the middle here. Now, what's really nice about reusing your mask is that if you're making a bunch of these, maybe for a swap, or maybe you're making invitations like I was, you can use your mask to remember what you did and kind of have them close to the same. But this is a very artsy technique, which means it's going to be hard to get cards really identical. They're each one of a kind, and that's actually something I enjoy. I like when it's one of a kind. Alright, so I've got tumbled glass on there, and now I'm going to switch to a little bit of broken china, which is another blue. And I'm going to bring that up above. And I'm actually going to put, a bit of ink on here because I do want you to be able to tell there's a gradient here. So you went from a lighter color, and I'm kind of turning in circles so that I don't get any lines on this paper. I just want soft, a piece of something, little soft cloudy effect. Okay, then I'm going to switch to faded jeans, and as long as you go from lightest to darkest color, and that's what I'm doing here, you don't have to worry so much about switching your foam applicator. But if you're going from darkest to lightest, I suggest you switch your applicators in between. Alright, so now I'm putting my darkest color up at the top and I'm kind of blending it into the broken china. Being careful to keep my little circles going so I don't get any lines and have nice softness, right? Alright, so now I'm going to switch to some greens, and I'm going to start with Shabby Shutters. And so, just pointing out, I'm going to switch, yep, so I put my thumb here and I pull up, and then I put that down, and I've got my applicator switched. I'm going to start with the lighter green, which is Shabby Shutters, and I'm going to just put a little bit of that underneath. I hope you can still see underneath the blues, which the tumbled glass it's underneath. And then I'm going to switch to my darkest green, which is Pill Paint, and I'm going to finish the bottom of the card with the Peel Paint. And I'm allowing the Peel Paint to overlap the Shabby Shutters, and then I can take a little circular motion to blend those together. Alright, now if you want, you can take a clean applicator foam and kind of blend it all if you want to. So I can go back to my tumbled glass because I didn't miss that, and kind of just blend all these intersections if you want to, or not, alright? Because the last thing we're going to do is we're going to mix a little bit of shimmer paint with water, and then we're going to wet this down. Move my ink out of the way so I don't wet down my ink. And again, because it's distressed ink, you will see that the ink color will intensify, and in certain areas it will blur and wick. And I think what this does for me is it gives me more of a cloudy type effect. Now what I'm going to do is, before I stamp this, now FYI, as you saw, I use my Stampin' Magic to determine where I'm going to stamp this. But I want to stamp it. It would look very nice with black, but I want to stamp it so that it is heat embossed, and that will raise the image and make it even more, you know, impactful. So because I'm going to do that, I'm going to actually heat set this. Alright, now I'm going to stop for a minute, and this is something I suggest you do when you get done with your inking, is you just wipe your hands, because the rest of your card is white, right? So you don't want to mess it up going through this process. Now when I take this masking tape off, you're going to see we're going to have very clean lines on the card on both sides. That's the point of the, that is just beautiful. Now I'm going to go heat set it, and I'll be right back as soon as I'm done heat setting. Okay, so it's all heat set, and you can see how beautiful that is. It's a lovely gradient, and it's got a little bit of a sparkle in it because of the shimmer paint, and that sparkle is just, it's amazing. Every time you tilt the card, a different place will grab the light. It's really cool. So now I'm going to get ready to do some embossing on here. And so I'm going to take my embossing buddy and just rub it across the card so that I don't get embossing powder anywhere I don't want to. Other people also have used like dryer sheets, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using dryer sheets for this. It gets rid of the static. Okay, so I've got it laying down, and I've actually taken a little bit more of that temporary adhesive and pasted it down again. Now I'm going to take some Versamark ink. Excuse my dirty pad, it's a little dirty, but it's still working just fine. And I'm going to ink up my stamp. I have purposely put this on a Stampin' Up sheet. Please understand that you should always use Stays-On ink for your Stampin' Up sheet and Stays-On cleaner to clean it, because you can actually smudge up your card with, dirty, with ink from your Stampin' Up sheet. So Stays-On keeps it from transferring. I did not use Stays-On today, so I did break my own rule. So let's hope and pray I don't get any of the ink from the sheet onto my card. And what I want to do is I want to black emboss this because I think it will add to the depth that I'm trying to get out of this card. So I'm just going to take a little bit of our black embossing powder. As I mentioned earlier, I want to pop this even more. Be right back. So I've cleaned up my space and I've heat embossed my image. And you can see that's really, really sharp now against that background. I just love this technique. I find it to be amazing on a card front. So now I'm going to take a stamp, a sentiment that is a scripture, and I like to get my scriptures from Verve because I can actually search on Verve by verse. I like to use a lot of scriptures, and so Verve has a good collection of basically all the scriptures that I like. Well, I like them all, but all the scriptures that I would like to use on cards, and I can search for them by actually where they are in the Bible, so I really like that. So I'm going to take this stamp, and again I've prepared my Stampin' Up already, because, oh, by the way, you can use the Stampin' Up with clear stamps, but here's the caveat to that. The caveat is, don't take the stamp off the block before you use it, okay? Because when you set it up in the Stampin' Up, right, you set it up according to how you put it on the block that day, right? So if you take it off the block, it's now in a different position, and the stamp, what you have on the Stampin' Up sheet doesn't apply anymore. So I know that sounds self-evident, but I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten that and assumed that this was right. So if I go and I clean my stamp and my block, and then tomorrow I come back and I want to do this card again, I have to re-Stampin' Up it because it is no longer in the same place on the clear block. I like to tell you when I make mistakes so that you know they happen too. And basically that's it. Keep your hands clean when you're working with cards like this because you are handling the paper more than usual. I love it. I mean, it's just something that makes my day. I did a similar card on a bigger one, so this is the standard size and this is a little bit bigger. You can see the difference. I did something similar for Christmas with a Christmas tree and a snowy background. Really interesting what you can do with this technique. I like taller stamps for it, or if you have shorter stamps, you can do it on a horizontal version and you can kind of fill that whole block with a stamp. And you can repeat your stamps too. So enjoy, and I hope to see you soon. Happy stamping. Bye. What you gonna do? For all our blessings we give praise to you. For mercy, love, and kindness and grace.